Good morning. I call the San Francisco Human Service Commission meeting of Thursday, February 17th, 2022 to order. It is now 10:07 a.m. I am the Human Service Commission President, Scott Kahn. Welcome, everyone. The Commission asks and thanks you for your patience during these unprecedented times. We respectfully ask the public to have patience and expect delays and gaps during the meeting. To eliminate background interference, all panelists and presenters are asked to mute themselves when not speaking or waiting to present. Before I conduct our roll call, I need to share with everyone in attendance at our meeting that our dear colleague, Commissioner George Yamasaki Jr., passed away last week. Later in the meeting, we will be voting on a resolution for Commissioner Yamasaki and will dedicate this meeting in his honor. Commissioners, please respond with present when I call your name. Vice President McCray. Vice President McCray, are you here?
Yeah.
Present.
Okay. Commissioner Singh, you're present. And Commissioner Semmel. Commissioner Semmel.
Oh, here, go here.
I know she's on, but maybe she just has it on mute now.
No, I
She
don't
is.
know.
We have a quorum. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move, so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, I
So
didn't.
moved. Our next item on the agenda is item 3, approving the minutes of our January 27th, 2022 Human Service Commission regular meeting. Can I have a motion to approve that?
No, just close it.
I hesitate
No,
on the basis of being absent, so I wasn't
No
here.
idea.
Okay, Darshan, can you make a
Yeah,
motion
Klaus,
to approve
you
it?
can-
So move.
And I
And
second.
There is a recording, you can listen.
All
to
right, second.
that
all in
later.
favor?
Aye.
So moved. Moving on to our consent calendar.
I have no idea really. You will get a transcript of the whole thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, do any of my fellow commissioners want to remove an item for individual discussion?
But they don't tell you.
Hearing no requests for discussion,
No,
is
they
there
have closed
a motion to
caption.
approve the
Has
consent
been
calendar?
enabled.
Yeah, second.
Click on.
All in
this.
favor?
So moved. Aye.
So
Click
moved.
X.
Mr. President, I'm getting, someone is talking and I don't know who it is over you or with
I
you.
think
I don't
I
know
think
why
it
it
might be
won't.
somebody helping Rita getting her phone working.
I see, okay.
Okay, and we've just muted that so you won't hear it.
Okay.
Item 5, commission business action item. 5A, requesting approval to allow teleconference meetings under California Government Code. Per the state law, the commission must take these findings once every 30 days for as long as they continue to meet remotely. Are there any comments or questions from the commission? Is there any public comment? Hearing no, request to speak on the item will close public comment. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Item 5A.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. The next order of business on the agenda is item 5B and requires a vote by the commission. Consideration and possible action regarding the Department of Benefits and Family Support and Human Service Agency fiscal year 2022 to 2023 and 2023 to 24 budget proposal
No.
presented by Dan Kaplan.
I can't do it.
Thank you, President Khan,
Thank you.
commissioners.
This is really something. Doesn't your nephew come today?
Yeah,
Let's see if he can.
I'll tell him.
We're here today.
And then he will also,
We're here today asking your approval for our recommended submission of the DBFS and HSA administration budgets. These budgets will be combined with the DAS budget, which was approved on February 2nd by the DAS
we'll
Commission.
get a printout later.
And they'll go together into the HSA submission for the to the mayor's office and the controller's office. And we'll be submitting our budget on February 22nd. So as we go through this presentation, I'll talk about the way the dollars move around in the budget and sort of major areas of addition and shifts. And then Trent will focus in on some of the major proposals for changes and talk about the programmatic significance of those. So just as a preface, before we get into the numbers here, this is a budget where we, according to the mayor's instructions, are living within the general funds that we have available to us. We're not adding or subtracting in any meaningful way, but we do have new revenues on the table, and we're making use of those new revenues to support core services. And some of the major ways that we're proposing changing the budget within new revenues are to fund a significant staffing increase within our San Francisco benefits net area, the part of the agency that does eligibility work for Medi-Cal and CalFresh. We are proposing repurposing a significant amount of money within the Jobs Now program because we've had less demand for subsidized wage and more demand for some of the other services that we provide in that area. We are also adding significant expenditures with revenues in this budget for 3 DBFS housing programs. Those are the CalWorks Housing Support Program, the Housing and Disability Advocacy Program, and the Bringing Families Home Program. The first two in ESSS and the third in FCS. There's also been, and this is reflected in this budget, a significant amount of growth in 2011 realignment funds. These are funds that within the DBFS budget fund FCS operations. And we're using this increase in revenue to allow us to balance a budget that's been a little bit out of balance and that we've been patching with one-time money to bring it closer to being in balance. We're also bringing on budget a number of specific items that we have been funding to this point with one-time money. And those are most significantly the items that constitute our emergency foster care system. So there is a large contract for short-term foster care that serves most of the children who come into foster care in San Francisco. There's also a program for mobile response, and there is a program for high needs foster care within that. These are all things that we funded with temporary or one-time money. To this point, we're bringing them on budget as ongoing items. There's also $2 million of general funds, which we're including on a one-time basis that's matched with state money that will go into a pilot for a guaranteed income program serving people who are emancipating from foster care. And then I should mention that that in our budget making process and in our instructions, we focus on things that are core items that we can fund within existing revenues. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't sometimes ask the mayor's office for additional money outside of the dollars available to us through existing or growing revenues. And the process that we follow when we're doing that is a little different. So the major item that we are discussing outside of existing revenues really has to do with coordination of community food programs. And during the COVID emergency, HSA's team stood up fairly large community feeding programs. We've carried them through the existing fiscal year. And we are separate from this proposal discussing with the mayor's office the form in which these programs may continue into the future. That is not included in the proposal that is coming to you today. That's a sort of a separate discussion we're having with the mayor's office. But I wanted you to be aware that it's out there and that we are discussing. So before we move into the slides, the particular substantive slides, I just would like to say that as in every year, this year has been the budget making process has been a process that's involved huge numbers of people from lots of the different program areas, from our planning group, but the group of folks who have been doing this full time every day for quite a few months now are our budget team, and our DBFS HSA budget team is constituted of our budget director, Emily Gibbs, our principal analyst, Justin Chan, Molly Chow, who focuses most heavily on the FCS budget, JJ Birch, who focuses on parts of the ESSS budget, and Jesse Rosemore, who focuses on the administration. So special thanks to them in putting this together. Okay, as this slide points out, we are building this budget within the existing general funds that are available to us. This year, we haven't had to cut any general funds, but by the same token, we were asked not to add general funds. So this budget does that. We are working with increased revenues, as I mentioned before. Both 1991 realignment revenues and 2011 realignment revenues. We have had growth in past years in the CalFresh and Medi-Cal revenues, and CalWORKs as well has grown. The allocations remain relatively high. There's been some adjustments up and down, but they're pretty strong still. We are adding money, as I mentioned, for the DBFS housing support programs. The three of them are enumerated here. May we go to the next slide? So, as you all know, we tend to look at the budget from a number of different angles. The first one we look at is the programmatic budget. And what you'll see is in most of the slices in the two pies here, we're pretty steady. There are a few items for us to point out here. If you look at sort of starting at the top and going clockwise around the pie, the program support budget has dropped by roughly $17 million. The biggest reason for that is that at this point, we don't have money in the program support budget for the continuation of the shelter-in-place system. In the current year's budget, we do have about $20 million in there. As you probably know, the shelter-in-place system was a system that HSA stood up during the first days of the COVID-19 pandemic to house homeless San Franciscans. We had the capacity to support about 2,200 folks in shelter-in-place buildings. And that program has gone forward. It's shifted over to HSH, but we are still carrying a good chunk of the money for the hotels themselves during this fiscal year. We still have to figure out how we're handling that in the coming fiscal year. The goal is to close down the shelter-in-place system, but that won't happen until the first part of next fiscal year. So then the next area is CalWORKs. You'll see there's an increase in the CalWORKs budget. Most of this is attributable to two things. The first is a substantial 7.1% grant increase, which was proposed by the governor and will be reflected obviously in local budgets. And the second thing is the additional Housing Support Program, HSP money in the CalWORKs budget. So those two together account for most of the increase. If we go around the pie, we get to the CAP budget down here at the bottom. As you'll note, the CAP budget goes up about $6 million. That is due to two things. One is that in the CAP program, we tend to mirror increases in the CalWORKs grant. So the CalWORKs grant is slated to go up 7.1%. We've projected the CAP grant going up 7.1%. And so that's in here. And the other thing that's in here is the additional dollars that we have for the Housing and Disability Advocacy Program, which is a program that's designed to help homeless individuals who appear to be eligible for SSI benefits get those benefits. So it includes dollars for housing and for SSI advocates. And we are delivering this program in partnership with HSH, but the dollars start off in the CAP program. And then the last slice of the pie that I want to mention here is the Family and Children Services budget, which grows. And there are some big puts and takes here. So actually aid money within the FCS program is down as caseloads have declined. But there are substantial increases for the Guaranteed Income Pilot Project. There is new money for the Bringing Families Home program, which is a homelessness program designed to help families reunify. There is money in the budget now, instead of one-time money, to support the emergency shelter system. There is money for the beginning of Families First Preventive Services Act investments. And then there's a fairly significant amount of money for catch-up of cost of living increases for contractors. And then overall, I should say, there's something that goes through all of the slices of this pie, is there's been a reduction, a fairly substantial reduction, which we'll come back to, in fringe benefit costs. And one of the biggest pieces of fringe benefit costs are retirement contributions, and retirement contribution costs are very much associated with stock market growth. So up till this year, stock market growth has been very high, and that reduces the cost of contributions to the retirement funds. Can we go to the next slide? So in this slide, we look at movements of FTE from one program to the next. I'll just call out a few things here. One is that you'll see there is a small reduction in FTE in Family and Children Services, and a small increase in, do we have? Thanks. The next one is that there's been a small increase in FTE in program support, and this marks a reduction in staffing as caseloads have come down in Family and Children Services, and a shifting of some positions to our HR program, our communications program. those are the big ones. And then there's something that I want to talk a little bit more about, and it's a little bit more involved, and that's in the area of SF benefits net. And as you'll see on this chart, it looks like there is a very small change in SF benefits net from 493 positions to 495 positions. That masks something that's really happening in this budget. So the SF benefits net program has for many years now carried 36 positions that actually work in the DAS hub. They do Medi-Cal and CalFresh eligibility work, just like SF benefits net, but they work within the DAS hub. They work heavily with clients of the DAS hub, many of whom are IHSS clients. And they have been supervised for a long time by DAS. And so in this budget, we've acknowledged that, and we've shifted those 36 positions from SF benefits net to DAS. Now, at the same time, there's been very substantial growth overall in the CalFresh caseload, and there's been growth in the Medi-Cal caseload. And overall, between DAS and DBFS, there is a need for more staff to work with this substantially increased caseload. And so in this budget proposal, we are proposing adding 48 positions to SFBN. Now, the way we add new positions in San Francisco is we tend to fund them for 3/4 of a year. So those 48 positions that we add become 36 FTE in this first fiscal year, and then there'll be 48 FTE in the subsequent fiscal year. So we've moved 36 positions out, and we basically added the same number of FTE back in. So what this does is it looks like a small change in SFBN, but it actually represents an increase of 48 positions to start in October of this year. It's a little confusing, and it's hidden in the way we do this here. So I wanted to call that to your attention. May we go to the next slide? The next slide is the slide where we look at differences in sources or revenues that support the programs. And I'll just go around the pie and tell you the most significant changes. The federal slice of the pie on the right side goes down. The largest change here is really in Medi-Cal closeout money. This is money that that typically we get when we overspend an allocation. Then a couple of years later, we get back some portion of the overspending if other counties have underspent. There's been some shift in the way we've handled the Medi-Cal allocations. The allocations themselves have gone up. Our overspending has come down. And this is the year where we feel the difference. So that's been a drop in the federal revenue here. State revenue has gone up fairly significantly. This comes from the increase in money for the CalWORKs Housing Support Program, the HDAP, or Housing and Disability Advocacy Program, the Bringing Families Home Program, and the state share of the Guaranteed Income Pilot. Those are the most largest things there. There's been significant increase in 1991 realignment revenues. Just again, realignment revenues come from the state to localities, and they are funded by state sales tax and vehicle licensing fees. Those have come back fairly strongly. And so realignment revenue is going up. 1991 realignment revenue offsets what what would otherwise be the need for general funds in our budget. So it doesn't have a net impact, but it does mean that more of the program is funded by state money than local. There has also been substantial growth in 2011 realignment that comes from the same sources, but funds primarily family and children services programs. And here, as I've said, we've taken that money and we've put family and children services on a stronger financial footing going forward. There has been growth in this bucket that we call 2011 realignment AB 85 aid. The name is a little opaque, but what this does is it funds what would have otherwise been the state share of the CalWORKs grant program. Those dollars have gone up because of the growth in the grant and anticipated growth in caseload. Let's see, what else do we have? If we look at the general fund operating money at the top of the chart, the this greenish slice, you'll see that there is a substantial drop there. Part of that is the increase in 1991 realignment. The biggest piece here is the elimination from this budget of the $19 million that went into supporting the shelter-in-place hotel system. And as I said, we have yet to come back to that with the mayor's office. So those are the major changes in there. Maybe go to the next slide. I think I was looking for a category slide.
Sorry,
back
Dan,
one.
bear with me a second here.
Yeah, go back one.
Yes. How do I do that? Oh, no. Why is this not-
Elizabeth, try hitting the up arrow.
That's it.
Thank
Thank you.
you so much. I'm
Thanks.
so sorry.
Thanks. Thanks, Jesse. Okay, categories. So categories refers to the type of expenditures we make in a budget. And let's just quickly go around the pie here. Salaries are up. This is mainly COLAs in anticipated COLAs. Contracts are being renegotiated now. So these are based on mayor's office assumptions. If we look at fringe benefits, those costs, as I mentioned before, are down, and that's due to lower estimated retirement costs. If we look at aid assistance, the dollars are down because this is where we have typically put the CalWORKs Stage 1 money, the money that pays for childcare for CalWORKs recipients who are in the Welfare to Work program. This money has moved from this bucket to the work order services budget. We'll come back to that later. The reason that's happened is that this is the current year is the last year, the budget year will be the first year of for the Office of Early Care and Education being part of HSA. So Office of Early Care and Education is part of HSA this year. Starting next fiscal year, it will be joining with the First Five Commission and will be forming the Department of Early Care. And so instead of paying for CalWorks childcare services wholly within our budget, we will have to work order the dollars to pay for those to another agency. So that's a big change, and that explains most of the drop. Offsetting that drop is money for the guaranteed income program. If we look at aid payments, they do go down a little bit, mainly because that's a drop in aid payment amounts in Family and Children's Services, offset by increases in CalWorks and CAP. If we look at CBO grants, those are going up because we have inflationary increases that we're catching up on in our budget. We also have new money for bringing families home, for HDAP, for the CalWorks Housing Support Program. And as I've said, we've brought onto budget the CBO expenses for the emergency foster care system, and so they're in here. If we go to what we call programmatic projects at the top, what you see is there's a huge drop there from $19.8 million to $0.7 million. That is where the money for the shelter-in-place hotel system is reflected. And so since we don't have that money in this budget at this point, that explains the big drop. And then the last item is the work order services. And as I mentioned before, the big change there is CalWorks Stage 1. There's also money in there for FCS childcare. And then there's more money in there for HDAP and CalWorks Housing Support Program, and that's money that's going to be work ordered from HSA to HSH to provide housing services within those programs. So that's the sort of the high level description of changes in the budget from a financial perspective. Now we're going to switch over to Trent, and Trent is going to talk about some of the key programmatic changes that are in this budget. So may we go to the next slide.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, Commissioners. So I'll take over from there. Thanks, Dan, for that thorough overview. I'm going to walk through the budget initiatives that we are proposing for next year, and I have it sorted by division, just so it's easier to track. So in our economic support and self-sufficiency division, some fairly significant investments that we're proposing for SFBN or SF Benefits Net. Which, as you know, Commissioners, is the group of employees, the division that does enrollment and eligibility certification for CalFresh and for Medi-Cal. As Dan mentioned in his remarks, the caseloads certainly have increased significantly due to myriad factors. You know, of course, one being the pandemic and the job losses we saw in the pandemic. They will continue to increase with expanded eligibility for undocumented individuals for Medi-Cal, and also our efforts to do outreach for both Medi-Cal and CalFresh is an attempt to maximize the number of individuals and households who are eligible who actually get access to benefits. So combined with that, we're estimating a caseload increase of about 11%. And when you think about the denominator of both, which is roughly 130,000 Medi-Cal households and another probably 40,000 CalFresh households, 11% is a large number of individuals and households. Given this, we're proposing a significant increase of 42 new senior eligibility workers and supervisors as well, and then some program specialists to assist with our outreach. We have seen, and this is something that is attributed to, I think, both the increased demand in our services, as well as shortage of staff and also staff being out due to COVID, our wait times for in our service centers, on our phones, in our lobbies, the wait times are increasing. The call abandonment rates are increasing. Our service standards, we try to, the standard we sort of try to reach is that we answer 80% of our calls within 30 seconds or less. That's what we call the service level, and that's been hovering around 20 to 30% over the last number of months. I should also say that the waivers that the state and some combination of state and federal government allowed us in terms of eligibility recertifications and negative actions, those waivers will end when the emergency declaration ends, which is going to increase the workload even more. So we are proposing a significant increase. In addition to better align with our management structure, we are shifting some eligibility staff to support the SFBN caseload that focuses on clients that receive services and support through Department of Disability and Aging Services. We're shifting those staff, really just sort of organizationally moving them under the Department of Aging or Department of Disability and Aging Services, so we can sort of better align their work and link them up with other benefits through that department that clients might be eligible for. All right, next slide, please. Continuing on our economic support and self-sufficiency division under Department of Benefits and Family Support, in our workforce development area, a lot of, we continue, of course, to deliver all of the services and workforce opportunities and training and Jobs Now access that we have in the past, but we're also proposing to expand some individual referral trainings. Really, this is we call them IR. So the IRs to sort of broaden the training options for our clients. The IR or individual referral trainings tend to be more industry specific. So learning industry specific skills that are hopefully tied to employment at the end, whether it's something like a certified nursing assistant or something in the healthcare world or some sort of IT training, really more sort of, again, industry and job specific. We also, in terms of our working families credit, which the mayor actually on Monday just announced, the HSA's provision of free tax prep and mentioned the working families credit in the press release. We're going to continue to offer the credit and suspend the once in a lifetime limit to receive the local credit. And it's $250. And really it serves as an incentive for households to apply for, complete their taxes and apply for their income tax credit at the federal and state level. And they get an additional local bump. We've been focusing a lot internally on sort of how to better serve our undocumented members of our communities. And we're looking to pilot workforce development initiatives for that population. And you see in the slide, it says CalWORK's mixed immigration status households. What is that? That is where the children of undocumented parents were born in the United States and therefore are citizens, but the parents are not. So they're still eligible to receive cash assistance through CalWORKs, but their parents are technically not on or receiving assistance because of their status. So we want to try to figure out and pilot what sort of workforce intervention can we sort of, what approach can we take for the heads of these households whose status doesn't allow them to necessarily work in San Francisco or in the United States and earn income, but there are ways that we could provide income support to these households in recognition that they are working. And so we're proposing $500,000 to pilot this. I should say that this is in partnership with the community as well, who we've talked with a lot, particularly the Latinx community, on how we can better support our mixed households and undocumented parents. We are also proposing to again expand our Career Pathways program by another 20 slots. And this is the Career Pathways program is an off-ramp from Jobs Now for candidates or for participants who succeed and have an interest in pursuing a career in in public service and working for the city and county of San Francisco. And so these 20 slots are targeted to those graduates of Jobs Now to get them permanent city positions. And then, of course, even with these redirections of funding, we'll still maintain capacity to further grow Jobs Now programs. I should say that it's been a challenge really the last 2 years. We've had sort of fits and starts with Jobs Now, where it would pause because the job placements are slowed due to the shelter in place and due to the basically the shutdown of the economy. Then we'd sort of gear up for a reopening. We'd reopen for a couple months, and then a variant would hit, and we would sort of semi-close down again. So we have accumulated a fair amount of savings in Jobs Now because of that, and so we're proposing to use a lot of that savings not only to sort of again re-energize Jobs Now and expand that, but also these initiatives as well. Next slide, please. Okay. So again, still under economic support and self-sufficiency and DBFS, significant increase in investment, which I've mentioned before, by the state, particularly this governor, who's very cognizant of the county human services role in delivering support for our homeless families and single adults. The governor and legislature proposed, the legislature passed a significant increase to our CalWORKs housing support program, almost doubling it, or in fact doubling it in current fiscal year, but also moving forward for 2 more years. It is in the budget again, as proposed in January, basically doubling the number of CalWORKs families, more than doubling really the number of CalWORKs families we can serve through rental subsidies and case management. But also the provision now of back rent to keep vulnerable CalWORKs families housed. Prior to the expanded dollars, there was limited ability for us to sort of prevent an eviction far upstream. The household would have to provide an eviction notice, and often that's too late to pay back rent. So this is going to give us more flexibility to preserve housing for families if they got behind in their rent. And then additional hotel rooms for HSP families who are awaiting placement in permanent not permanent housing, but housing supported through the HSP rental subsidy, sort of serving as a bridge to that placement. And then similarly for our single adult housing program, the Housing Disability Advocacy Program, or HDAP, which targets disabled single adults who are homeless. And the idea around this program is to provide housing support while the individual is pursuing application for federal disability benefits, SSI. There's really a lot of evidence showing that if an individual is homeless, the success rate at getting approved for federal disability is much, much higher, not only when they have advocacy support, which this funding will provide, but also when they have housing support. It's just that increased stability offered by the housing and the housing subsidy provided through this really does make a difference. Next slide, please. Okay. Now shifting gears from economic support self-sufficiency over to family and children's services, which, as you know, is our child welfare services system and foster care and adoptions and more. So I've talked in the past a lot, and we've had presentations on this as well, as the shift in the way that the federal government funds child welfare services, particularly in this county where we're operating under a waiver for 5 years, which allowed for essentially a block grant of federal dollars, irrespective of the level of our caseload. The shift, the ending of the waiver and the shift to Families First Preventative Service Act, FFPSA we call it, which allows us to use federal dollars in a prevention way, which we couldn't before under the regular federal 4E funding. So we can basically serve families upstream prior to or to prevent removal of children from their birth parents. One of the things we're looking at doing is to re-up our peer parent program. This is a program that it's really a great resource for families and for parents who are involved in the foster care system and child welfare, and really as a resource to help parents navigate the sometimes complex kind of pathway to reunification and accessing services. And we're looking to design it in a way that will draw down some of that federal money for prevention. It has to be considered a evidence-based program that's approved by the federal government and their clearinghouse that's part of the FFPSA law. We're also going to continue to provide ongoing funding for not only for Seneca Center's intensive services for our high needs youth. We're expanding that to include alternative family services, or AFS, which currently oversees our emergency foster care system, as well as an FFA certifying a lot of foster families for a more longer term placement. We do have access to the state's, what they call their complex care funds, which is the recognition by the administration, the state administration, that we have a small number of children who, or youth in care, who require really, really intense and high cost services that the regular rate structure doesn't support. And so there's additional dollars that we can claim against to support services for these youth. And then a couple of new programs. One is, and Dan mentioned this as well, the state Department of Social Services is in the spring will be releasing a request for proposals for counties to provide a universal basic income or guaranteed income program for foster youth. I believe it's 35 million statewide, thereabouts. To support this, there is a required county match. And so we are working with our partners locally in philanthropy and other community stakeholders to develop a program that we would apply for that would provide $1,000 a month in guaranteed income to former foster youth. And we have set aside in our budget for next year $2.1 million to do this. And of course, sort of based on our confidence that we'll receive one of the state grants, given the sort of the kind of historical kind of investments that San Francisco has made for this client population, as well as the partnerships we've forged to move forward on guaranteed income. I think our application will be very competitive and likely will be funded. And then another housing program that was expanded under the governor, which is the Bringing Families Home program. This is something that we actually were one of the initial counties to participate in the pilot or demonstration program. This is housing support for parents for whom their housing situation is a barrier, a potential barrier to reunification. So a homeless family would be provided with a housing subsidy, and that stable housing often can lead to and does lead to reunification when coupled with services. And so this program allows us to expand this. We're anticipating about $4.2 million each year through fiscal year 23-24. Next slide. Okay, and just in our program support or admin area, which we refer to as more of the Human Services Agency rather than BFS, because it supports the admin group supports, as you know, both the Department of Benefits and Family Support, which was formerly DHS, but also DAS, Disability and Aging Services. And so looking at all sort of the admin structure, which is planning and policy, communications, of course, our great budget team, contracts, finance, HR, IT, facilities, investigations, and disaster prep, disaster preparedness and disaster response. So that those divisions support, of course, both departments. We're doing a little bit of work to augment the administrative infrastructure, shifting 3 positions to meet HR needs, particularly around hiring. And we're doing position substitutions rather than new positions. We're taking vacant positions from various parts of BFS and moving them to admin support. These are basically vacant positions that we reclassify as for a new function, which is easier to do and get through the budget process than brand new positions. And then lastly, what we're focusing on in the admin area is continuing to assess our future office space needs. it's challenging. I'm sort of a couple things, couple comments on this, and then I'll conclude. I think that the pandemic and our very quick transition to telework and mobile work that was, necessitated by the shelter in place gave us a lot of information and thoughts about the future of work and what it looks like post-pandemic. And everything from, do we return full scale to everyone in the office, or do we continue to do mobile work and telework? What does that look like by division, for sort of SFBN versus family and children's versus admin? And sort of course, in thinking that through and what it looks like, it impacts the need for office space. As you know, we want a building at 170 Otis, which is where Bourne Auditorium is. As you know, that building does not meet the new seismic safety standards, and that the retrofit is really cost prohibitive. And so at some point we will be moving out of the building, but we don't know whether we replace that building one for one in terms of, looking for a building or set of buildings similar to that square footage, or whether we can actually downsize. And I do think it will be the latter, but it's really too early to sort of provide kind of a roadmap to figure out what we actually need. So we're continuing to sort of do that analysis and assessment of our needs, and working with the city's Department of Real Estate moving forward, as well as keeping close contact with the city's capital planning group should we need capital dollars to support whatever new buildings or different buildings we might be in. Next slide, please. I think that's the last for so that's it for in terms of our budget enhancements around program and admin. Just briefly, the timeline. So today is the 17th. Should you approve our proposed budget, we would forward that to the mayor and the controller's office on February 22nd. And then, of course, the dialogue continues with the mayor's office and with community stakeholders around what the budget ultimately would look like, going from the mayor to the board, and also in being informed by what happens through the state legislative budget process as well, and any federal changes that might happen that would potentially be reflected in the June 1st budget that goes to the board. And then our board committee hearings, of course, in June, and then an approved budget in July. So as we've done in prior years, I'll continue to update on the budget discussions and negotiations at our monthly meetings, as things tend to move a little bit. Not generally don't change significantly, but tend to move a little bit. So I believe that's the last slide. And so I'll go ahead and pause here and certainly open it up to questions from commissioners. Opportunity for public comment as well. So I'll go ahead and send it back to you, President Khan.
Thank you, Trent. Are there any comments or questions from members of the commission?
I have some, but I want to wait to hear what any public comment before I make my comments.
Any other members of the commission have any comments? The floor is yours, Reverend McRae.
Whoa, thank you. Mr. Kaplan, Mr. Rohr, and all of the staff and community, thank you so very much for the work you do. Appreciate it. It just, well, it comes at a time when we're so off balance, and we're trying to find in these numbers and in these new initiatives and these new directions, hopefully that balance for going forward. So thank you so much for just that kind of consideration. And I had some thinking about the 20 million shifts from sheltering in place, and I had something just to thinking about the whole benefits team having to be reoriented and built up, SF benefit. That's the initiatives you're bringing forward, requiring new people, 46 new staff folks in this area. So how are you, my thoughts boil down to this: how are we feeling about being able to fill these positions? And then in this instability that all of us who've been around are feeling, what do we have in mind, as I was trying to hear, to try to, the word now, onboard people, to try to build new community, figure out how we're going to relate to one another 3 days a week, one day, whatever it is we finally come, because that's going to give our morale and our ability to make it through this time, I think, strength. And so I don't know if that's a question more than just me running my mouth.
No, I think there are questions embedded in there.
Yeah.
Commissioner McCray, and it's almost as if you're in our internal meetings, we're talking about this stuff, because those are precisely the questions we're asking each other. A couple thoughts on the new positions that we're asking for. We, our HR division does a position control report that we look at, and we are right now at probably the highest number of vacancies in our agency in my tenure. We're something like, we're high 200s, 280 or something thereabouts. Can get you an actual number, an actual accurate on the number I can give you, but that's roughly what it is. And that's way above our natural rate of attrition, which tends to be around 8%, off of an FTE count of about 2,400. So we're almost, maybe not quite double, but we have probably 100 positions we need to fill. So there's that. And that was entirely due, and I talked to my colleagues across the city, very consistent with other departments and their struggles. Department of Public Works, for example, has 530 vacancies. We're not at that number, but the pandemic has really proved challenging in terms of recruiting. And then secondarily, and you mentioned it, Commissioner, onboarding. And we take eligibility staff as an example. During the pandemic, we had to do, onboarding eligibility staff is complicated. I mean, the eligibility rules that are, created by the federal and the state government, and the IT system that tries to translate those rules into computer software. It's not easy. It's very complicated, and it requires generally 6 months of generally in classroom training. Well, we couldn't do that in the pandemic. It was all online. And our passage rate, meaning sort of you're hired in 6 months of training, graduating successfully and passing the post-test was much, much lower in the remote environment, not surprisingly, I guess, than in the in-person. And then secondarily, and you touched on this as well, is sort of the morale, but also really organizational culture, right?
Yeah, good word.
Right, getting to know the people you're onboarding with, when you're doing on-the-job training in person, it's much different than over a Zoom, right? When you're sitting side by side with a peer, or getting to know your supervisor, getting to know the people who are in your unit of 8 workers. And so we're looking to revamp the way we're doing on that sort of 6 months, right? Partnering with UC Davis and looking at what other counties are doing, and stealing some curriculum to try to boost that passage rate up. The other piece is hiring. And so you might ask the question, and maybe embedded in your comments was, look, you have a lot of vacancies, yet you're asking for 40 plus new positions. And this is a question I'll get at the Board of Supervisors as well, after I get it from the mayor and the board's budget analyst. You have all these vacancies, why do you need new positions? Well, we've done this sort of the analysis of, if we're going to reach that service level that I spoke of 80%, meaning we're going to answer the calls in a timely manner, we're going to give good service, people are not going to hang up because they're tired of waiting for 10 minutes, people can get seen in the lobby within a reasonable period of time and not waiting around forever. We think we need 40x, or more than 40 more EWs, even after we fill and catch up to the positions that are vacant. The challenge lies in the very, very strange labor market that we're experiencing right now, where people, what did they call it? The Great Resignation of 2020, right? There are more qualified, there are a lot of qualified people who are choosing not to work. And you're seeing that across all industries. And I think you're seeing it in government. I know our nonprofit partners, our CBOs, are really struggling to fill positions. We pay better than CBOs, but still there is an additional calculus, I think, in the labor market, people looking for jobs that wasn't there prior to the pandemic. And so we are going to have to be, I think, more creative in terms of recruiting people, talking about the opportunities for remote work, talking about really and we've been participating in a lot of job fairs over the last number of months, talking about sort of the worthwhile nature of the work that we do,
Yeah.
right? Trying to sell candidates on our mission, like, hey, you can be part of San Francisco's response to the income gap, San Francisco's response to joblessness among marginalized communities, San Francisco's response to getting people back into the workforce, San Francisco's response to providing healthcare to everyone who's entitled to get it, sort of that way. And it remains to be seen how quickly we can catch up. We're looking at increasing our training classes, so being able to onboard more people at the same time rather than sort of limiting it to 20, maybe doing 30 or 40 people at a time. So a range of strategies, Commissioner. And then at the same time, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, our HR department is very, very stretched. And you saw in one of the slides, I say we're adding 3 more positions, but they have had to respond in certainly unprecedented way to the pandemic. And not just sort of figuring out how to run an HR shop when 85% of your staff are remote, but HR is the messenger and the carrier of all the new policies that came in under COVID, right? From masking to provision of PPE for staff, to figuring out telecommuting agreements, to figuring out the ever-changing guidance from Cal OSHA, from our HR department. And that's something that, basically that was the priority, right? We had to make sure our staff were safe. We had to make sure that we were following the rules that the state and local, were doing regarding our buildings and access to buildings and client access, and writing out policies and procedures and getting all that stuff out takes a lot of time. And we don't have any staff necessarily dedicated to HR pandemic response. And so what that meant is we're pulling people from our hiring group, for example, or from our different areas of our HR division. And so, and that's, again, similar to other departments where HR was sort of, it's the repository of everything that had to do with pandemic and our workforce. And they did a fantastic job, in combination with our IT division and our facilities group, but it really took a toll in terms of our sort of normal HR operations. And so I'm hoping that, we've said this before, but, are we ever post-pandemic? But I'm hoping we get to a point where, we can do all that work to catch up and not be sidetracked by another variant and another, shutdown or semi-shutdown, if you will. So a very long-winded answer and explanation to your question.
No, I just appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate.
I mean, I think it's a great question. And just to say one word here, I mean, when we went through the most recent surge, at the peak, we had 50 plus infections a week. And all of those went through our contact tracing operation, which is run out of our HR shop. As we moved into vaccine mandates, obviously everyone needs to be vaccinated. And we as an agency need to track that among our employees. And so our HR shop is the group that interfaces with the system to track it. And then when folks don't look like they're vaccinated, has to get in touch, has to talk through documentation questions, has to get people to go to vaccination clinics and things like that. So it's been a huge lift in that area. And Trent laid out many of the reasons we're behind, but just the attachment of HR staff to that special workload has been a really significant piece of it.
Yeah, I forgot to mention probably the biggest workload, which was rolling out of the vaccination and getting all the verification for 2,400 employees and 5 commissioners.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. You get us done. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anyway, Mr. President.
Yes. Are there?
I move the approval of the budget.
Is there a second? Is there a second from one of the members of the commission to approve the budget? Rita raised her hand. Okay, so All in favor?
I,
Aye,
Aye.
so moved.
Thank you.
Moving on to item C, resolution honoring George Yamasaki Jr., presented by our Executive Director, Trent Rohr.
Thanks, President Khan. So, well, you know, this is obviously difficult, and we wanted to do something we're going to do many things to honor George, but we wanted to do something just at the commission level, and the staff decided we draft up a resolution to present to the commission to approve. And I'll read that in a bit. But before I do, I just want to say a few things about Commissioner Yamasaki, or George. Many of us know, hopefully all of us, but not all, know that George is the longest standing city commissioner in San Francisco's history, over 45 years, spanning 5 decades, starting with Mayor Joe Alioto. And I'll read the resolution because I want everyone who's attending to understand all the civic contributions that Commissioner Yamasaki and George made to San Francisco. But he really, and obviously I've had the privilege of knowing George since I started in 1996, so 26 years. He valued his role as a commissioner, and he took it very seriously. He read every page of every contract and memo. In fact, just at our meeting 2 weeks ago, when we had a snafu in terms of getting the commission packets out, the paper packets, he printed the 190-page commission packet at home so he could review it on paper. And the reason he wanted to review it on paper is because he annotated it, and he would highlight areas that he wanted to question staff on, or at least raise as issues. And that was just 2 weeks before his passing. In fact, even in that meeting, if you all remember, you know, we had a debate back and forth on whether commission members should even vote on items that they had not necessarily been prepped or read. And that just shows, you know, he wasn't doing it for the sake of being a nitpicker. He used to call himself the nitpicker, but he was doing it because he believed in good government, and he believed that the commissioners should be voting on things that they understand and that are able to ask questions and again, take it very seriously. He was very involved as a commissioner, particularly with our Family and Children's Services Division. He attended all of the foster parent appreciation dinners, he and his wife, and used to get all dressed up. Sometimes they were black tie. He used to go on his own as well after Ann's passing. Always at the foster parents holiday luncheon, sitting at the head table. Always attended the Independent Living Skills foster youth graduation. He was a staunch supporter of our foster youth fund, which is the employee-driven nonprofit that raises money to provide support to our foster youth. He attended the softball tournament, which is our big fundraising event, every single year. And sometimes in the marina at Moscone Field, it gets frigid, and George would show up with his big parka, gloves on, hat, and he would watch every game. He loved baseball, but I think he went to those games because he wanted to talk to staff and to support HSA. You know, that was just George. You know, I think kind of thinking about George and why he was so driven to be on this commission. I remember under Mayor Newsom in 2004-ish, Mayor Newsom really wanted to he asked for all the department heads' resignations to sort of clear the deck on that, but he also asked for all the commissioners and wanted to sort of get fresh ideas and fresh faces, and this is his words, not mine, into the commission, and he wanted to replace Commissioner Yamasaki. And George called me, and he was upset. You know, he dedicated a very long time to this commission and cared a lot about it. Obviously, had a lot of institutional knowledge and was very, very effective as a commissioner. And so I arranged a meeting between Mayor Newsom and Commissioner Yamasaki, and came out of that meeting called me, he's very excited, said, Trent, you know, he is gonna reappoint me. I do get to serve another 4 years. And so, you know, I think George probably impressed Mayor Newsom. and with his understanding and knowledge of human services and certainly his dedication. But I think what drove him to be on the commission was that he was just such a caring individual. He cared deeply not only about the population that we serve, but about me and about our commission secretary, Elizabeth, before Elizabeth, Krista, Louise, and about staff. And he got to know staff. People, I got a lot of nice emails. We sent out a memo to all staff about George's passing. And I got a lot of nice emails, mostly from family and children staff, saying I got to know George. I met him at the softball tournament. What a great, sweet man he was. But always would ask me about my kids, how they're doing at baseball, how are they doing in school. He loved the Giants. He loved baseball. He would send me articles all the time about whether it's about baseball or anything he thought I would find interesting. Just really show what just a genuinely caring and sweet man he was. He was so impressed, and the staff, HSA staff who are on, I can't see how many people are on, but he was so impressed with the work that staff did. He always would comment, whether it was a budget presentation from team or a presentation from Family and Children's Services on a new initiative or our comms team. He was just always say, wow, I'm just so impressed with the not only the level of work, but the dedication. And he would always go out of his way to tell me that or to tell others that. And he also knew that the context that we do our work is very challenging, and he understood that as well. So, his passing certainly, without a doubt, is an institutional loss. But it's not only an institutional loss, it's a personal one for me and for Elizabeth. And I think for a lot of HSA staff. So with that, I want to read the resolution, pull myself together a little bit. Let me pull it up real quick. Okay. So whereas Commissioner George Yamasaki Jr. was appointed by Mayor Joe Alioto in September 1975, when the policy body was known as the San Francisco Social Services Commission. And whereas Commissioner Yamasaki is the longest serving commissioner in San Francisco history with over 46 years on the same commission. And whereas during his tenure, he served as president in 1977, 1980, from 85 to 87, from 92 to 96, from 01 to 03, and from 2004 to 2007. He's the one who established the Employee of the Month program in March of 1986, which we still do every month. He knew staff worked hard, and he wanted to recognize employees for their creativity or innovation or outstanding service and dedication. He created the George Yamasaki Scholarship Fund to help foster children attend college, and Mayor Newsom declared November 10th, 2005 as George Yamasaki Day. And whereas Commissioner Yamasaki was a staunch supporter of the foster care system, as I said, and regularly attended the ILSP Foster Youth Graduation Ceremony, foster parent recognition events, and the Foster Youth Fund annual softball tournament. And whereas Commissioner Yamasaki was the Human Services Division's self-appointed nitpicker, noticing important details in contracts, keeping the meetings running according to Good Government Guide and the Brown Act, and noticing important mistakes that people have missed. Whereas Commissioner Yamasaki was an active advocate and leader within the Japanese American community in San Francisco, even before joining the commission. And during his tenure, he was secretary and general counsel with National Framer Incorporated, which is the developer of San Francisco's Japan Center. That was from 69 to 73. He was president of the Japanese American Citizens League from 71 to 72, National Legal Counsel for Japanese American Citizens League for 2 years in the mid-70s. He especially enjoyed his work as co-chair of the Northern California Cherry Blossom Festival in 74, 77, and 78, which led to a lifetime of volunteering and emceeing duties at the festival. He was director of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce of Northern California, member of the Japanese Task Force Peace Plaza Committee, and director emeritus of the Japan Society of Northern California. And whereas Commissioner Yamasaki was involved in numerous nonprofits, including serving as a member of the Executive Committee of the American Cancer Society, a director of the California League for the Handicapped, director of the International Institute of San Francisco, trustees of the World Affairs Council of Northern California, trustee of Coro Foundation, director of the San Francisco History Museum, director of the Asian American Bar Association, and advisor to the National Japanese American Historical Society. So George did a lot. He wasn't just a commissioner. George really touched a lot of elements of civic life in San Francisco. He devoted his career in private practice of the law since 1960, specializing in matters related to immigration and nationality. He has lived in San Francisco since 1959, Marina, where he raised 2 children. So be it resolved that the San Francisco Human Services Commission honors Commissioner George Yamasaki Jr. for his many years of dedicated public service and for the impactful contributions he's made to the residents of City and County of San Francisco. So commissioners, that is a resolution for your approval. And I hope that, I don't think there'll be a doubt that you'll approve it. Thanks for listening to me. And thank you to all of the staff who are online to watch this. And I just got a text from Jim Buick, who was Deputy Director at Economic Support Self-Sufficiency. He worked at the agency for 20 years. He just texted me just now. Great guy. Please keep me updated on the services. Thanks. And so speaking of the services, Elizabeth and myself are gonna work in a small committee with George's son, Paul. And I think Paul is on here, and certainly Paul, I and my entire team express our condolences to you. But Paul and Elizabeth and myself and George's longtime music companion, Ben Fong Torres, are gonna figure out how to properly honor George, and services that hopefully will be next month. And we'll certainly let you know. I'll kick it back to you, President Khan.
Thank you.
Trent, can I say something?
Paul, would you like to make
Please.
some comments?
I'd like to make
Yeah.
a comment.
I just wanted to say, Trent, that your kind words are very appreciated by me personally. Your comment about his love for baseball is true. I think as a kid, he'd tell me how he would keep statistics on Joe DiMaggio and other great baseball heroes. And I think he really preceded the modern day analytics. And then your comment about him being a stickler for detail and printing out, hundreds of pages of documents. He's very thorough, and I think I personally kept the paper industry in business. But yeah, he's going to be missed. And I appreciate. I see the chats, the comments about my dad. His impact goes beyond just our household. So with that, I do want to thank everyone very much for this dedication to my dad. He always spoke enthusiastically and passionately about his involvement with the Human Services Commission. I'm sure he is smiling. He's with us now, beaming down on us, and he definitely receives this remembrance with humility. So I appreciate everything you guys have done and what you mean to him.
Well, thank you, Paul. And he certainly will be with me at every meeting because, as people know, I definitely have been known to make some mistakes, and he was the guy that would straighten them out. And Paul, I appreciate you being here and your comments, and we will certainly remember your dad, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I say something?
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner Semmel.
I sat next to him at most of the meetings that I attended, and I learned a great deal from him. I've done by his attentiveness, by his questions, by his comments. He knew what he was doing, and he taught me a great deal, and I will always remember him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Semmel. Can I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
So moved. Thank you. Anybody have any stories they'd like to share?
I'd like to share a story. I'm Tony Lugo, if you can let me on for 1 minute, Elizabeth. So
Go ahead, Tony, you're on.
So anyway, thank you so much. but I wanted to share a story. One of my first jobs as a very young man was working for the courts in the federal court system. And I was in charge of putting the dockets together for the judge. And I remember, this is 42 years ago, there was this lawyer that used to come with these immigration cases. And I was amazed about how passionate he was and how he would fight with the judge to get these people political asylum and stay. And it was just my favorite attorney that I saw in my docket. And then little to know, like 20 years later, I went to work for Arriba Juntos, and then there was this old man that showed up at the back door with a bunch of suits. And I remember him, and he was then a commissioner already, and he would donate his suits to Arriba Juntos when I was there. And then, you know, I come to work for the agency, and, you know, he used to always say hi to me, and I became just so endeared to him, and I just wanted to share that with you. I love George, and I'm gonna miss him as much as you do, but I wanted to share that history between him and me that goes back 43 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, man.
Anyone else would like to make any comments?
Yes, this is Sophia Eisen.
Hi, Sophia.
Hi. I was very thankful to have Commissioner Yamasaki in my life. You know, like Trent, who just meant a lot to people. My program was responsible for coordinating those events for foster youth and foster parents, and he sincerely enjoyed attending. He'd make it a point to talk to youth, talk to caregivers, talk to staff. And it really meant a lot to hear his kind words on December 16th when I was honored as manager of the year. He really, I just can't even express how much those words meant to me, because he acknowledged how much I smile and how much I cared for our clients and staff. And I just really appreciated that. And, to a son, Paul, thank you for sharing your father with our agency and staff and clients and foster youth. He was a very special man. So thank you so much, and my condolences to your family.
Are there any other comments? Well, I believe I've already asked for the motion to approve it. So any other public comment? If not, let's move on.
President Khan, I think we were gonna, when we move to adjournment, we're gonna adjourn the meeting in his honor, I believe. Okay.
Mr. Rohr, I was just about to suggest that.
Being there is no
Thanks,
public
Commissioner
comment and no request from the general public, we will adjourn our meeting in honor of Commissioner George Yamasaki Jr. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bless you, Mr. Paul Yamasaki. Peace be with you, my brother, and the family.
Thank you.
Mhm.